Hello, good morning, good evening. Welcome wherever you are in the world. You're tuning in to the webinar, Hidden Treasures in Finance Automation, How the Top Companies Transform Shared Services. You're here today to listen to two senior thought leaders in the space. We have Chris Wetmore, Principal Management Consultant with RSM.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. Look forward to talking a little bit more about some really emerging, fun, interesting technologies that it's really providing a lot of value to a lot of our clients and hopefully to you. So happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Great to have you, Chris. And then we also have Nick Ezzo, the VP of Marketing with Auditoria AI.
Thanks, Jordan. Great to be here and looking forward to the discussion, everybody.
Fantastic. I'm glad to have both of you on board today. Before we go ahead, I have a tiny bit of housekeeping that I want everyone to know about. Firstly, this is a live session, which means that you can ask your questions throughout the webinar, but we will try and answer them at the end. But it does mean that we will be answering them in real time. So please do submit questions if you have them. I also want to let you know that one of the great things about this platform is that you also get complimentary downloadable tools and resources to help supplement your learning for today. So not only do we have a great little PDF on assessing automation at RSM. One of the other things I want to share with you is a Survey Monkey where you can share your insights in finance and accounting and contribute to the third annual Auditoria 2022 survey. It's looking at automation in the back office. It's a short 5-minute survey. Please do submit if you're interested. That's everything I wanted to share with everyone. If you're interested in connecting with Nick or Chris, you can also go to the LinkedIn or email buttons available on the right-hand side of the screen. That's all for me right now. Gentlemen, please take it away.
All right. Thanks, Jordan. I'll kick it off here. One of the most fun parts of my job as a marketer, as a person who works for an automation company, is I get to help finance people get their lives back. I get to help companies become stronger, more resilient, and more competitive. And then also I help people think about problems in a very different way than they have thought of them before. So I'm hoping to change some minds here and give you some food for thought, some things to help you think about how you approach automation in your own function. So it goes without saying, which is what people normally say when they're about to say something, that a new finance back office is emerging. We've spent a lot of time over the last few years focusing on costs and improving efficiency. But now companies are moving more toward a strategic value creation focus. I mean, gone are the days when it was just closing the books, reporting to the board or to Wall Street, and getting the tax information out to employees or getting taxes paid. That's all table stakes. So it goes without saying that stuff needs to be done. But the shift is underway, and it has been for many years, to move really to be a genuine business partner to help guide the business strategically and also to help create value. We in the finance department are the stewards of our organizational data. And I'm going to hopefully show you today how you can take some of the data that's in your back office, whether it's in email, in your systems of record, or other sources, and really find those hidden gems, those secret hidden treasures that are in your data. So how do we make this shift? Well, it's not going to happen overnight. It's been underway for several years, but I'm glad to say that that this shift requires us to acquire new skills, and organizations have to adapt. So it's not just about stopping doing the things you're doing, but really it's helping your team understand the things that are important and the things they should be doing, and also stop doing the things that you're doing. Meaning, as we get into a report that you can download, as Jordan mentioned at the top of this thing, we surveyed 600 finance people, and we asked them, hey, what are the things that you're doing that are manual, and what are you spending time on? And they said, you know what, we're spending time on repetitive and clerical tasks. 60% of people said, I'm checking and updating data, I'm doing repetitive tasks. I feel like a robot while I'm working. And if you feel like a robot while you're working, chances are a robot should be doing that job for you. 30% of people spend 6 to 10 hours a week doing follow-ups, requesting documentation, sending communications out. 20% of people said they spend 10 plus hours a week doing that. I'll pause here, and I'd like to ask my co-host here, Chris Wetmore from RSM. Chris, any surprises here and some of the data that we pulled?
No, I mean, you look at the office of the CFO or the traditional finance and accounting office. I mean, it hasn't changed a whole lot in the past 30 years. It's been pretty stable, static type things. But with the emergence of technology and some of the new things that are in technology, it creates a lot of opportunity that's out there. And when you start talking about upskilling our finance department, some of that is looking at the next generation of financial leaders, right? The millennials and the zennials, right? These people are more technical than we've ever been in the past. They're more computer illiterate than we've ever seen before, and they want to do more advanced activity, right? They don't want to be doing invoice processing, getting that invoice and typing it in anymore, right? Especially in today's, sort of state of talent war, where people are jumping over and over again. People want sort of high reward type careers faster and faster and earlier in their career. So, you see some of this and you're like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to provide that to, my employees, the newer employees or the emergent leaders in our group, to get them excited about their day-to-day work. And I think some of the stuff that we found here really sort of points to, like, there's a lot of opportunity. Like, there's just a lot of opportunity out there to obviously impact our business, but also impact the lives of everybody that we work with, which is pretty exciting from my standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. I interview CEOs or CFOs all the time. In fact, I curate a little column called the CFO Corner. And Chris, I believe I interviewed you for that a while back. And I spoke with a gentleman a few months ago, and he said, Nick, one of the questions I asked him was, hey, what's it like hiring people right out of school? And he said, Nick, I got to tell you, it's hard. It's hard because these kids coming out of school, and I call them kids, but these young adults who are entering the world of accounting and finance, they don't want to do data entry, as you said. They don't want to make sure column A matches column B. And they certainly do not want to call people on the phone and ask them for money. And so, like, it's very, very difficult to get younger people to do those skills. They want to be that business partner. They want to be the person who provides the insight. They want to be data jockeys and evaluate large data sets and make recommendations for the business. So I couldn't agree with you anymore, Chris. That's 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting if you go to like a lot of the big business schools and ask them about their accounting majors, right? People who traditionally did this, they're going to tell you it's on the downswing. And as an audit firm, like we see this. There's less and less accounting majors graduating, and that happens sort of from a macroeconomic perspective. The economy goes well, those people who might have been doing accounting now do finance and economics versus traditional accounting. So the people that are entering the workforce and are going to be the leaders in 10, 15 years, right? It's a smaller workforce now than it ever was before. And, we now need to be more creative in how we sort of service them and recruit them and entice them to come work with us.
Yeah. Let me share another stat with you. This one blew my mind when I pulled it yesterday. 333.2 billion is the number of sent and received emails every single day worldwide. So right now we are in 2022, 333.2 billion emails are sent and received every day. That started out in 2017 when this study was being tracked, 269 billion. By 2025, they're going to add another 100 billion per day, increasing it by a third. So the reason I bring this up is when I talk about the friction in the back office or in the shared services function, every company has a shared mailbox. Sometimes they have more than one. It's AP at your company, it's AR at your company, it's finance or accounting at yourcompany.com. And this mailbox is full of stuff. And some poor person, probably the lowest person on the totem pole in the accounting team, has the inglorious task of sifting through this thing and trying to figure out, what are people asking for? Is this a vendor asking for a copy of an invoice? Is this a customer asking for a PO? And somebody has to go in and evaluate every single message. And sometimes it's in the thousands per day. And then they have to go find that information, attach it, and send it out. And this is one of the things, as I kind of go through my section of the presentation and how we think about automation of Auditoria, is that shared mailbox is really a source of hidden treasures that you can mine. You can remove a whole bunch of work, up to 70 to 80% of the work being done by that group, and you can get a better view into your cash performance. So I'll talk more about that. But Chris, what are your thoughts about this email stat?
Yeah, I'm curious how much of this is spam, but regardless, I know that there's a whole lot of emails that go around every day, and a lot of that is basic communication, a lot of back and forth communication. And, I think, from a grander technology perspective, I think it's going to be really interesting to see if these numbers come true, because, you're starting to see, things like Microsoft Teams and some of those things try to attack email, right? How can we lower, right? Everybody's trying to lower the emails, like, and you see that again with sort of generational changes, right? I grew up being in my email all the time. Like that's how I communicated, but now you're seeing much more over instant messaging, over other forms of communication, persistent chat, et cetera. So it'll be interesting to see all that. But, the types of emails that you're talking about in terms of just like, basic queries around certain pieces of information or status, like, I don't know if those are ever going to go away. So like, how do we resolve that? How do we lower that? Right. So, the less time people spend in their inbox, the more time they're being productive or doing analyzing of information and data and providing value.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm getting at least 1 billion messages per day in my mailbox. But what's an interesting stat is there's only 7 billion people on this planet. There's only 7 billion people on planet Earth, and that is an astronomical number of emails that get sent. So I agree with you. That's got to be a lot of spam, a lot of like inbound like marketers like myself trying to get the attention of the buyer, and hopefully we can. The death of email has been predicted for many years, but the opposite has happened. I just keep getting more and more of them in my inbox every single day. So let's talk about some of the costs of why, if you don't stop and think about what you're doing and change kind of the paradigm, as a CFO or senior finance person, you're going to find it very difficult to obtain reliable data and insights for your decision making. What's the cost of that? You could make the wrong decision. You could make the right decision, but way too late. You could miss opportunities for investment and growth and expansion. The CFO is supposed to be the person who reduces risk in the organization, but if you are spending all your time trying to sift through data that's not easily consumed, you may be actually introducing risk for an audit or some other liability. And then, of course, poor experience for your customers, your vendors, your employees, and other type of stakeholders. We at Auditoria, we tend to think about things holistically, and it's not just about efficiency, but it's also about providing the best customer experience for your external parties. So
I think definitely, Nick, when you start talking about CX and EX, right, customer experience and employee experience, all that can get ruined very quickly when you have bad data. I was talking to a couple of the futurists here in RSM, about the blockchain and the future of blockchain and the meta world, right? Well, those things are all dependent on data, right? We need good data to be able to sort of do, some of these really sort of futuristic, emerging technologies. Blockchain's been around for a long time, but it really hasn't, truly been implemented worldwide. And, one of the problems is like, there's a lot of bad data out there. There's a lot of bad data. So like, anything that we can do to, get our data to be cleaner and better and faster, right, only provides value.
Yeah, for sure. Let me give you some examples of how companies have failed at this in the past. So, this is a cliche, but successful companies adapt, or they don't adapt, in which case they don't exist anymore. And so companies that adapt will thrive and grow. Companies that don't will get left behind or disappear. How many of us remember some of these companies that are on the screen? I'll use Blockbuster Video. Chris, you and I'm sure grew up with videotapes, and then later on DVDs. You'd go to the store, and all the good movies were taken. They'd charge you an extra $1 if you didn't rewind that VHS tape. And I think the last Blockbuster store closed about a year or two ago because Netflix really ate their lunch and taught them how to do things differently, or showed them that there's a different way that you can approach this problem. I remember clearly standing on a street corner in the rain, waving my hand like an idiot for this yellow car to come and pick me up. I don't do that anymore. I have an app on my phone. I can see the person. I can see their rating. I can see how much they're going to charge me. I can see how far away they are. And I can order an Uber, right here and right now. I was taught, as you were too as well, don't get in cars with strangers. Yet today, here we are, like intentionally getting in cars with total strangers. And then the last thing I'll say is that the brick and mortar stores of Sears, Penny's, Macy's, they got their lunch eaten by Amazon. So, I'm not trying to scare everyone on this call, but the point is it's not a zero-sum game. Like you will either adapt or you will not. So thoughts on these shifts?
Yeah, I think back to Netflix when it first came out. I mean, they built this whole platform on, an internet and a network that was really poor. They really sort of counted on the fact that the internet was going to, internet and fiber optics and the whole world of the internet was going to improve and bandwidth was going to improve. So at the beginning, Netflix had Netflix was really wasn't anything to look at. And Blockbuster wasn't scared. They're like, Like we're, so they're like, oh, it's working right now. Everything's working. Like, why should we change? Like, this is working great for us, right? But Netflix is like, well, I see the future. I see what's coming down the line. I'm going to build this now. It might not be perfect right now, but as things improve, right, this is going to improve the customer experience. I can just click a button instead of have to drive to Blockbuster and pick up my VHS. So like, these companies on the left, yeah, it worked. And it was working, and they're happy and they're making money, but they weren't looking ahead. They weren't thinking about the next step and being, intentional around sort of taking steps towards that, versus depending on the fact that, hey, well, it works now, so it's going to keep working. The one exception I always think about, though, is, looking back at your other slide is, you think about the post office and email. Man, how is the post office still around, right? We got 300 billion emails, and yet the post office is still out there, right? And when they're competing against email, like, right, all they can really do is be like, oh, we got weekend delivery now, yes, that's all they can do to compete. But I guess in truth, Amazon sort of is helping the post office again by delivering all the packages. So
for sure.
I always found that interesting. The post office, should theoretically go on this list too.
Yeah, for sure. But if you forgot grandma's birthday, email ain't gonna help you out, brother. You better get down to that post office, or better yet, the FedEx office, and overnight get something really nice for grandma. So
yep,
cool. So it's not just Chris and me that think about this. Ray Wang from Constellation Research, he believes that the autonomous enterprise is where we're going to be in the next 10 years, like the total self-driving back office. Nisha Bhandari, senior director and analyst at Gartner, she believes that the future of work is all about automation, and we're going to reshape the finance back office. Tyler Sloat, my buddy, the CFO over at Freshworks, he thinks that business resiliency and streamlining these customer and supplier interactions are where things are headed. And then finally, Mike Herrick over at Bain, he's predicting that some of these new technologies that Chris and I are going to expose you to today are going to really double over the next couple of years. So it's coming, and hopefully Chris and I will help you think about things a little bit differently today. But it's not just Chris and me; it's a lot of really smart people out there.
Yeah, my favorite. I mean, I always have a tough time with research analysts. I'm like, you're not working in a business. You're not doing finance. Like, what do you know? Well, if you go and look at Gartner, and one of my favorite Gartner articles every year is the hype cycle, and they talk about the hype cycle and sort of the hype cycle of technology. You go back 10, 12 years ago, and you look at the hype cycle. They're going to talk about tablets, right? They're going to talk about all these things they think are coming in the future, and sure enough, they're really core, right? I mean, they have a couple misses here and there, but truth be told, like, it comes, right? So these technologies are without a doubt coming. So it's just a matter of how quickly, right? And then I start to think about the leadership within our clients and within organizations out there, and the changeover of that talent, right? The CFO leadership that's out there is changing over. It is being more technical. They are being looking for more advanced ways to bring value, right? So like that changeover, right? As we look at generational changeovers of leadership, you're going to look at people being more innovative around the office of the CFO, right? And that's going to drive, I think, a lot of automation into it, right? As they're trying to say, like, well, I don't want my people doing what I had to go through, growing up in, the late 90s or the early 2000s. So, like, what can I do, right, to get better value out of my employees and theoretically, hopefully, keep my employees longer, versus, the current status of, constant job hopping.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit, Chris, because I want to make sure you've got enough time to go through some of the materials you've prepared. So I'm just going to go through the next couple of slides. This is kind of my North Star, where what I think about is I'm trying to get people to think about or imagine a back office where you don't have any manual data entry, little or no errors in your financial data, real-time visibility into cash coming in and cash going out, an amazing customer experience, and an improved life for the finance professional. So if we can accomplish this, then my life will have been complete. So the other thing I tend to think about is right now we spend a lot of our time on transactional processes. We spend a lot of our time on reporting and compliance, and very little on insight and action. And I believe that you can use digital innovation, specifically next generation technologies, to invert that pyramid and take those, use the cloud, use artificial intelligence, and use analytics to spend more time on insight and action, and less time on reporting and compliance, and even less time on transactional processes. Thoughts on this shift, Chris?
I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but yeah, I mean, I think, when you look at some of these, and some of these technologies aren't brand new. I mean, RPA has been around for 15 years now, as an example. Some of the AI stuff is a little bit, computer vision has been around 4 or 5 years now. So it's not like we're dipping our toes into brand new waters here. But the idea that, instead of processing invoices, I can analyze vendors and potentially get some additional discounting, right? You're bringing real value to the bottom line there, right? And that's what I think, inverting the triangle here really can do.
Yeah, and what artificial intelligence and some of these algorithms are really good at are things that human beings aren't. So a human being can tell you, okay, your customers are starting to pay later, or you get more and more they're in arrears, so they're paying past the deadline. But what an AI algorithm would tell you is your customers are not overdue yet, but they are paying less early than they used to. And so that's the kind of thing that human beings aren't really good at, or they're not trained to do, where a bot can do that for you. So let's look at some of those, some of the challenges we talked about: the friction, the lack of insight and transparency, the manual and time-intensive tasks in the back office, and of course the errors and omissions. Using some of these smart bots and technologies that we have, as Chris mentioned, computer vision, natural language processing, machine learning, AI, these are the types of, and really advanced RPA allows us to optimize those processes and make better decisions with surgical insights, increase our productivity, and then of course, increase our accuracy and cost reduction. And this is really, where we're getting to. So I'll bring us home with my last slide, Chris, and I'll hand it over to you. So at Auditory, we think about, this is a little bit of a complicated diagram, but let's just say this: we've got smart bots. That's these little, they look kind of evil in this picture, but they're cute and they're friendly, and they're not going to try to kill you like the Terminator. And they attach to your system of record, whether it's your ERP, your accounting system, or your master vendor records, whether it's Bill.com or Coupa or whomever. We connect to all of those systems, and we connect to your email, that shared inbox that I told you guys about earlier. And whether it's vendors asking for things like, let's just use a few examples here: vendor onboarding, vendors, asking for, where's my payment? The bots will reach out and ask vendors for an updated tax form, so you don't have to do it. And then if somebody sends a PDF attached to your email that's an invoice, the bot is smart enough to say, oh, you know what, that looks like an invoice. I'm going to take all those line items and bring them into the system, code them accurately, and present them to a human being for application into the system of record. On the other side, order to cash, we do what's called smart collection, smart pay, and smart insights. So our bots don't wait for somebody to call you. They actually reach out and send an invoice to your customer. It says, hey, you know what, your bill's due in 10 days, or your bill's due in 3 days, or tomorrow. One of our customers, large software company up in San Francisco, they reduced their DSO by 10% in the first month. So I thought that was pretty amazing. Part of it was technology, but part of it was that they never bothered to ask for early payments before. And once they started doing that, then they found that they had access to a whole bunch of cash that they didn't have before. And then last but not least, what we call the smart GL. That's this advanced accruals. Instead of asking your suppliers, hey, you didn't bill us this month, how much are you going to bill us? The bots will say, hey, look, I haven't gotten an invoice from you. How much do you think you might bill us next month or this month? And the journal entry will be created automatically by the smart bot and surfaced up to a human being. Bank statement and general ledger matching. Some poor person has to look at a bank statement and your ERP system and try to make sure that these two things match up. Again, when you feel like a robot while you're doing a task, chances are a robot should be doing it, and that's one that we've automated. Many companies that are out there today, sort of in the same category as us, the next generation of technology, do bank statement to GL matching. I think it's super useful. The bottom line on all this stuff is that, once you do these things like connect it, train it up, use, kind of the deploy and optimize method to, train the bots on what they're doing. I'll just let it build. Then you can take all those tasks, like 70 to 80% of those routine mundane tasks, take them off the plates of your junior finance people and allow them to do the work that they went to school for. Chris, that's all I'll say on this one. I'll love your thoughts on it, and I'll hand the mouse over to you to take us home.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And yeah, I mean, I think, what you guys provide in terms of this sort of ecosystem is really interesting, right? Especially when you start talking about the office of the CFO and finding sort of quick, easy ways to potentially add some automation into it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the world of automation. and sort of all the tools that are out there. But, I wanted to start off talking, even taking a step back and sort of like, what is the 2022 business trends that we're seeing out there? And I'm not going to read everything over to the left, but like, what you're seeing is a high focus around the employee. How are we supporting our employees? How are we reducing the turnover, right? We're starting to hear a lot more about the shortened work week, right? So like maybe we're using automation to shorten the work week, right? So that we've got 4-day work weeks. I've heard about the 4-day work week for probably about 5-6 years ago now, and I'm still waiting for it. I'm crossing my fingers for it, but how can we do that, right? There's a certain amount of work that exists out there, right? That right now we need a human workforce to sort of handle, right? And unfortunately, like with COVID and sort of the changing way we work, it's an unstable resource, right? It is not the stable resource that it used to be. Or, even if you look back even 10 years, the talent resources during the recession were incredibly stable. You didn't see a lot of movement because there was a lot of opportunity out there. Well, there's a lot of opportunity out there, and it's, sort of exponentially bigger because you don't have to live near the company anymore. You can live anywhere. So like that creates exponential type opportunity, right? And I think, the latest unemployment numbers were incredibly low as well. So, we need to sort of really focus on, the employee experience, right? Sort of some of this impact over on the right. It's going to be hard to cut, to continue to grow and add talent, all right? So we need to find an alternative capability, alternative resource to get work done. Right. And at the same time, the employees that we do have, we have to focus in on that employee experience. We have to make sure that we're optimizing their experience within the organization to, hopefully help stabilize some of that talent. Right. And automation sort of plays a critical aspect, part in that whole ecosystem to really sort of lower that dependency on the human resources. And, it's sort of, weird to sort of talk about humans and talent as sort of a resource, right? But at the end of the day, it is. And for most companies, it's the highest value resource. And yet we're putting them at the lowest value type activity at times versus putting them at the highest value, aspect of the business. So what have we seen over the past, couple of years, 2020, 2021, we see across all organizations from, very, very small organizations, less than 1,000 employees, all the way up to the enterprise, right? Enterprise organizations, really large organizations, been investing in automation for a long time. 5-10 years, they've been experimenting. They've been looking at different ways to potentially, integrate automation, into the back office, to the front office. You see a lot of automation in call centers these days, being able to, really enhance the customer experience. Well, it's starting to see, we've started to see it and really sort of bleed over into that employee experience and using automation around sort of back office processing. And there's a lot of low hanging fruit, a lot of repetitive work that's happening. Right? And you see sort of the plans, across organizations from Forrester in the top right. Everybody's planning on doing it. It's just a matter of when. And you don't want to be too late to the game, I think. And it's not meant to be a scare tactic, but you don't want to be Blockbuster at some point in time by any means. So, but that productivity, that reliability, that organizational agility that I like to call it, right? Being able to scale up and scale down depending on economic conditions, is really enabled through the use of automation and emerging technologies.
And there is a cost when an employee walks out the door. I mean, like you've spent all this time and money and resources to get them trained up and the institutional knowledge and what it takes to get things done in the company. And if you let them walk out the door, I mean, they are literally walking out with not only your company IP, but like all the training you've given them. And now you got to start from scratch. You got to hire a brand new person and bring them up. And yeah, there's some benefits to that, but I think it just really hurts sometimes when you have people walk out the door and you could have saved them by giving them a great employee experience.
Exactly. So just another, interesting point here. Gartner, leading IT research firm, we heard a little bit about them earlier. 3 years running, hyperautomation, a key trend, right? So it is not going away. 3 or 4 years now in a row, their annual top IT trends, automation is top. I mean, it is out there. And one of the big reasons that you're seeing it is hyperautomation isn't just IT. It's not done directly in IT anymore. They've sort of realized, similar to the accounting field, the amount of talent in IT is also small compared to the demand that's out there. So how can we, what they call democratize the ability to do automation and to implement technology within organizations, right? And a lot of the tools that are out there, low code, RPA, point solutions, right? It really is meant to enable the business to do IT as well, right? And you think about once again, the changing generational, the millennials, the zennials, they are more equipped to do IT type work than any generation in the past. Yeah, it's an IT trend and it's affecting IT, but some of the trend is also bringing the larger organization into IT to deploy IT technologies. So interesting stat. Like I think hyper automation is going to be in their top trends for the next number of years. I don't know when it's going to go away because automation continues to expand. The use of the tools, the ease of the tools are also growing exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
So some other key metrics, and I know we're going to try and get this done in the next 5-10 minutes. So some other key things, just to say, sort of reemphasize the fact that people are investing in this, they're searching for it. The growth is real. It is happening. If you haven't done it already, if you haven't researched it, you need to do it. Now, at the same time, I want to caution, just because everybody else is doing it, everybody's jumping off the bridge doesn't mean you have to jump off the bridge, but you want to be on that bridge and you want to take a look down below and see what's out there, right? And then, maybe plan that jump a little bit. I think, one thing that we see a lot is they get very excited about some of the technology and they jump in very, very quickly to it. And, that sometimes will lead to some disillusionment around the technology because it was failed, it wasn't well planned, it wasn't well thought out, it wasn't thought about in terms of how they're going to integrate it into the overall operating model. You need to think about those things. There's a change management aspect of this that really needs to go into it. So, as much as, I believe in implementing some of this technology, I also believe in taking our time, understanding the business case, understanding the impact to the operating model versus just, hey, I'm just going to plug in another system and expect everything to work perfectly, right? It does change how you operate your finance organization, your shared service environment.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It does need to be planned out carefully and using a change management framework and make sure you have all your stakeholders on board and that you're communicating and over communicating. There's lots of ways you can mess it up. And so I think you're right that people need to do it, but they need to do it smartly.
And oftentimes you've messed it up on the first time, you're set back multiple years because you now have to overcome the reputation of whatever happened in that first project, right? And you lose a lot of potential value over the course of those years. If that first sort of pilot, that first thing that goes out, doesn't work as well as you hoped it did, as much as it probably wasn't the technology's fault. Once again, automation heavy in the finance area. A couple of key points here. On the left is really sort of from IMA, just transforming the finance, where they're looking, data and RPA and AI, top 3 that people are looking at. Over on the right is activities in finance that are can be automatable. And Nick sort of showed a bunch of graphics around sort of what Auditoria does, but you can see a lot of the general accounting operations, cash disbursement, revenue management, highly automatable. So if you've got a large teams that are working on top 4 or 5 of these things, it's time to sort of take a step back and say, like, well, yeah, we can keep going and I keep hiring people, but if I automate this, then all of a sudden I don't have to hire 10 people and I can redeploy them in some other area of the business, some other area within finance, right? It helps it, right? And the cost of recruiting and training, all that cost can get transferred because you're just changing people's roles into higher value activity, without having to go through that whole recruitment process.
Well, specifically in shared services, I mean, like that's why people have a shared services function, whether it's in-house or outsourced. And sometimes many times they use labor arbitrage. They try to go to a low-cost geo, whether it's the Philippines or India or Tennessee. But eventually you run out of people. Like you can't just keep throwing bodies at the problem. You have to try to really think about how can we solve this problem in a very different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I don't think that, once again, from just a macroeconomic perspective, it's not going away. I mean, you look at birth rates that are out there, you talk to millennials about, their family planning, right? I mean, there are so many bodies that are in the world and, we have to understand that, we as a society might be plateauing a little bit in terms of population as well. So we have, and there's, I read an article, I'm based in Boston, and they just had a future of work article, and they talked a lot about like, we generally as a society have to figure out ways to invest and upskill our entire population right now, because there's just not going to be enough people, to continue to grow. Like our economy can't grow without people. And, how can we do that? Well, the only way to do it is to automate it, introduce various, robotics into our economy relies on a workforce. And when that workforce is flat, the economy sort of slows down quite a bit because there's no one buying and there's no one more to work. So, how can we sort of, work within that paradigm?
Yeah.
So the next slide as it comes up is, a really good slide that I really enjoy talking to clients about because there's a lot of confusion around automation that's out there. I mean, there is a ton of it, right? You can select automation. You could spend weeks researching it all and have come out on the other side and having no idea where to start because there is a lot of technology that's out there and there's a lot of different types. And I've sort of tried to break it down into sort of two main buckets. There's the build and then there's the buy, sort of classic build versus buy, also known as platform versus point solutions. Down the left-hand side, we see all of what I would call platform solutions. These are solutions that give you a platform, you build it on your own, right? So when you talk about RPA, robotic process automation, being able to automate repeatable tasks within an organization. This has been around for a number of years. You've got your solutions around Automation Anywhere, UiPath, Microsoft, Blue Prism is out there as well as another major vendor out there. They've been around for a long, long time, but you're building from scratch. Okay, so if you've got a process that's very, very, very sort of business custom to you, you don't want to look at these solutions because no one's going to build a solution for a specific business process that's very unique to you. Okay, so those are where those ones really fit in, right? At the same time, further down the list, you start looking at data blending, Alteryx, RapidMiner, being able to take large data sets and work with them and take them through a data process, right? That's what these tools really do, is being able to take multiple data sets, combine them, cleanse them, move the data around to get them through the system. Is really what these data blending. But once again, you're started with a nice clean slate and you have to build that process. You have to build that data translation within it. Very drag and drop, but very, very start from scratch. And then the bottom left, you start looking at document extraction, really what we call advanced OCR or intelligent OCR. Classic OCR has to be very, very structured. Everything has to go in the same spots every time. The new AI-driven, computer vision-driven OCR allows you to work with various documents to be able to pull them out, and it organically learns, as it processes more and more documents, and the throughput becomes much, much higher. So traditional OCR, 30, 40% type processing, AI-driven OCR or intelligent OCR, you're looking at 80, 90% processing, right? And it's continuously learning, working with the employees, to continuously learn how to read these technologies. Now, on the right-hand side, once again, these are more point, right? These are ones you go to you go to these organizations, and they've got solutions specifically built around specific processes. Procure to pay, you're looking at Coupa, Bill.com, AvidXchange, right? These are going to take you from the PO through the matching, through the payment process, right? Very, very specific, right? And it's automated. It actually includes some of the computer vision. So they process so many invoices, they've included that directly into those solutions. So a little bit more point, less customization available to it. It's going to integrate with your ERP, but allows you to sort of, eliminate sneaker work, automate a lot of that process, and really drive sort of the AP process. And then you get expense automation. This has been around for a long time, especially with like Concur, pretty self-explanatory, travel and expenses, all those receipts coming through. Close automation has been sort of around for a couple of years now, but really doing, account reconciliation type work and really sort of automating that financial close process and driving down that time to close. We've seen clients go down from, really long down, up from a month down to a couple of days using tools like Blackline and Flowcast. Then at the bottom, we've got tools like Auditoria that's, pre-built, AI-trained type tools, right? And these are not a singular point solution, but it comes with a set of point solutions that are really meant to work within your ecosystem. So it's a little bit of both worlds. Not really a platform. You don't have to build anything there, but sort of a portfolio of smart skills, as they call it, or basically automations that are driven and leverage AI to drive it through. Much more plug and play. A little bit of customization and configuration available through it, but meant to be a faster time to value. And that's a huge concept within automation, is time to value. Time to value on, from Auditoria and everything on the right is much, much faster than everything on the left because you don't have to build it. Now, granted, RPA, you can build a bot in, 4 to 8 weeks and have it deployed. So it's not super long, but you then have to maintain that and support that on an annual basis as well, versus everything on the right is much more sort of supported through those vendors. So, Nick, I don't know if you have anything to add around sort of the, my world of automation, especially in the finance world.
I really like how you've laid it out here, because it makes it very clear, like all the different things. The left is the build, the right is the buy. I think you've really done a good job here. One thing I'd point out is that a lot of these companies actually interact with one another. I know that as Auditoria, we partner with probably half the companies that are on this list in one way, shape, or form, or we connect to them. So I think that's another trend that we're seeing, is that these don't exist in a silo, that they do plug in with one another, and you end up with a situation where 1 + 1 equals more than 2.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you guys have done a really nice job, in terms of integrating and sort of forming some really nice partnerships with a number of the vendors here to sort of do that best of breed without sort of the traditional downfalls of best of breed, right? You mean the traditional best of breed downfalls is, I got to build all these integrations, I got to worry about my data flows. Well, with the cloud and being it cloud enabled, a lot of those are sort of taken away, so you can go with a best of breed sort of strategy without some of the downfalls that, traditionally came with a best of breed type strategy. So last couple slides I have is, really starting to, think about like, how do I get started here? There's some newer technology out here, and this is from Gartner again, really around process mining and process discovery. So if you're working in a large shared service set and you're like, well, I've got a bunch of processes, traditional finance processes, or other shared service processes that I need to look at, but where do I start? Where am I going to get the most value? Well, process mining and process discovery are tools that actually allow you to hook into your current environment, hook into your system, and deliver insights, value, and data analytics around your processes. So if you're trying to debate like, okay, do I do order to cash? Do I do account reconciliation? Do I do collections? Do I do vendor management? You're able to actually use these tools and look at the transactions, look at the bottlenecks, understand how those processes are working, so you can decide and understand like, okay, here's the value, here's who's involved in these processes, and build that process model, right? And then once you have the process model, the future, ideal process model built, you can then go back to that previous slide and say like, okay, well, here's how we're going to apply these automations, to our highest value automation opportunities, if you will, right? And like I said, sometimes it's a mix of point and platform solutions, depending on, what they look like, what those processes look like. But these tools become incredibly interesting, and they've only been around for a few years. But the essence of, there's two different ways that they really work. One, from a process mining, they're using the systems logs within your core systems to pull data out and look at the timestamps of each entry within your organization, and understand how a certain process is going from step to step to step, and where it's getting slowed down, where it's getting sped up, and who's doing what. So you can figure out who needs training, where the bottlenecks are, where you might be able to automate along the way. And process discovery uses computer vision to look at non-system type activities. So, there's a study out there that about 60% of the daily work is not within one of our core systems, within your ERP, your CRM, whatever system. So like, how do we capture that work? Well, that's where process discovery comes in. So you marry those two technologies together in a large mature organization, and you're able to get a really good vision of how your organization is starting to work. So from like, what does that look like? What do those tools sort of look like? So, here's some of the dashboards that you can get. In the top left, you can see in terms of various dashboards around certain processes, and you can do that, whether it's automated or human driven, right? And it's going to drive and create these process flows in the bottom left here, right? Really gathering all that data and driving it through and providing you good insights in where to start your journey, how to start your journey, from a technical and a data-driven strategy versus I think we spend a lot of time here or here or here. So it's all about really, once again, sort of starting wisely, start being very, very intentional on how you start this, thinking about obviously the technology, what technology you're going to use, but then, okay, who are the people, right? And this is going to also give you who are the people this is going to impact along the way. All right, so you can get ahead of that and start into that change management that Nick was also talking about. So really interesting stuff, especially in a shared service environment or a large shared service environment that a lot of people are doing a lot of processing. How can I get a better understanding of how that looks without going in and whiteboarding it all out and understanding, well, this is how it's supposed to run. Well, in reality, it's probably running in a lot of different other areas and a lot of different other variations.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where this industry is going to go in the next few years, because I mean I think it's just really taking off, and some of the advanced technology like using AI to map these processes, I mean it's only going to get smarter and smarter, and the more data it ingests. So this is a very exciting part of the market to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, Jordan, I think that wraps up. I think Nick and I are around for the next 15 minutes to take some Q&A, talk a little bit about automation and AI in the future. But at very least, really appreciate everybody's time, and hopefully you guys learned a couple things today. But we'll turn it over to you and see what we got for questions out there.
Thanks so much, Chris and Nick. So we do have a couple of questions that have come through. I do want to remind the audience that if they would like to submit their own questions, they can click they can type it into the Q&A box on the left-hand side of their screen. And then I'll make sure that Chris and Nick are able to answer them live and in real time. So just while we wait for more people to submit their questions, I do want to know, how do you approach the topic of automation with employees? I know that we discussed a little bit earlier about the fact that automation is now becoming vital for employees who want to see less data sort of jockey work in their day-to-day. But what about the employees that may be resistant to change? What is your advice there?
Yeah, Nick, do you want to take it first, or you want me to take it first?
Why don't you go ahead and take a shot at it, and then I'll tell my story of my Buick station wagon.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan, one of my favorite things to do with clients is, first things first, I gather the team that, we're thinking about applying some automation, and I tell them to take out a piece of paper and I say, okay, write down the top 5 things you hate about your job. Like, what do you hate doing? Right. And undoubtedly everybody, everybody has something that they do not enjoy about their job. Right. And then I ask them the next 5 things, like, okay, if you didn't have to do those 5 things, what would you actually do instead? What would you use that spare time to actually work on? Right. And then, once they have that, I collect it and say, or I have a conversation about what's going on there and say, like, all right, well, there's some technology that can actually do this. So let's talk about that. Right. Because I want you to do those second 5 things. I don't want you to be doing the first 5 things. I want you focusing in on those second 5 things, generally speaking. And that gets them excited and says, like, well, I'm not just taking your job away. I understand you want to do this, and I'm going to help you do that. Right. So now they're engaged and they're bought into the process from a change management perspective. So, the other thing I'll like to do is, I'll rewrite job descriptions ahead of starting an automation. So, like, all right, well, if I'm able to automate 70% of this person's work, what is their job description going to look like in the future? How can I integrate that in so that as I present and kick this off, I say, like, okay, Jordan, this is your job. Once we're done, here's your job. Right. And hopefully you're excited about that. And hopefully it aligns with your career goals, because, you're not doing some of those lower end repetitive tasks that you were doing before. So those are a couple of the key things that I really like. Change management. We like to bring in our organizational change management as well, for larger organizations to really work through that as well. And we've had a lot of success through that. So Nick, go ahead.
Yeah. So my Buick station wagon story. So I believe that technology elevates human work. It takes it up to another level that's more meaningful. And I tell the story about when I was growing up in Cleveland, Ohio in the 1970s, my mom used to drive this Buick station wagon, and she'd pull into the gas station, and a little guy would come out of the hut, and he'd pump the gas for her and wash the windows and check the oil. And, she'd swipe the credit card with the little mechanical card swiper. That was during the 70s. During the 80s, when I was in high school, they introduced something called pay at the pump, where the little guy didn't come out and pump your gas anymore. You swiped your credit or debit card and you pump your own gas, unless you live in Oregon or some parts of New Jersey. And it occurred to me, like, what happened to that guy? Did we put him out of work? And, I like to believe that maybe he became a pay at the pump installer or maintainer, or maybe a designer of pay at the pump systems. I think, Chris, you might have been the person who pointed out to me that, no, he actually is still inside that hut, but he's making more money than he's ever made before. And he doesn't have to do as much work, because now he's selling $5 candy bars and $8 Gatorades and $25 bottles of windshield washer fluid. And so
scratch tickets, man. It's all scratch tickets too.
It's like scratchers. So that guy he got rid of the parts of his job he didn't like to do, and now he's not, I shouldn't say he's putting his feet up, but he's making more money and he's working less than he ever has before. So that's my thesis about how automation and technology elevates work instead of takes it away.
Yeah.
I think that is very interesting, and kind of does bring me on to my next question, which is looking at how much work it does take to automate. I'm curious to hear from you both how much involvement from IT is required.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, it highly depends. Like I said, the vendors that are out there, the software providers that are out there, and Nick can talk to it as well. I mean, yeah, IT has to be involved. There's a security, component that should always be considered as part of one of these. But, a lot of these are meant to be very business driven, right? So the office of CFO, the shared service can really go and drive this with support from IT, right? So yes, IT needs to be involved, but they're not driving it like they would drive a big enterprise-wide sort of implementation or software development project. These are meant to, these technologies are really meant for business users to sort of get involved. There is this, this big trend, that was around probably about 5-10 years ago around the consumerization of IT, right? You can go to anywhere on the internet and download an app, or go get an app here or there, right? And we saw this like deluge of technology within organizations of people using this style, right? I can go use Smartsheets or SharePoint or other tools that are out there, like that, all these tools around various things, Google Sheets, etc., all do the same thing, but like depending on the person, right? That consumerization, automation is really sort of capitalized around that entire understanding of, well, business users know technology too. They want to be in it, right? Now, if you get into sort of deeper areas of like UiPath, like, yeah, you're going to need a technologist. There is some coding capabilities around variables and looping, right? That gets into it right around building those platforms. But a lot of those point solutions, can be built out with very, very little IT involvement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. We were at Shared Services Outsourcers Week a couple of weeks ago down in Orlando. And, we met a lot of the folks, maybe some of the people on this call who are members of SSON. And, a lot of the titles of people we talked to were like digital transformation, or organizational transformation, finance transformation. So these are technically IT people who are tasked with supporting the organization, the Office of Finance or HR or IT, they're there to help transform. And they're there to be kind of consultative. They're the guide. They'll help evaluate the technology. But I can tell you from a philosophical perspective, that's kind of where we see IT playing. They de-risk the situation. They make sure that it's solid, that it's SOC 2 compliant, that your data is not being, harvested or, stolen by the bad guys. But at the end of the day, it should be owned by finance. These tools should be able to be operated by people who are accountants and finance people who don't have advanced degrees in, COBOL, Fortran, C++, or whatever people are programming in these days, JavaScript, who knows? So we're of the opinion that the end user should be able to operate the automation on their own.
I agree. I think that it is definitely something as well as IT you don't want IT to be a bottleneck for all transformation. You want them to be enablers. And so I think that that's definitely something that makes a lot of sense. So I do see one more question that I want to end on. And I think that it's really pertinent to this discussion around finance. Looking at automation, a lot of the conversation is around AP or AR, but we haven't seen too many talking points on fixed assets or intercompany or closed books. Is there any good IA opportunities there that you think sometimes don't get as much attention?
Yeah, I know I talked a little bit about Blackline and Flowcast on the financial close automation, which is, account reconciliations, a lot of those close, any sort of repetitive intercompany type transactions or entries that you're making. Those tools have grown, by a ton over the past couple of years, and you're seeing a lot of sort of new tools come into the environment around that. But undoubtedly, being able to work with some of those processes within finance are really good opportunities as well. And you're seeing a lot of value, not only in sort of time savings, but speed. There's obviously the pure human element of saving time, of people, but there's also the time of getting data, right? If I can close my books in under 5 days, right, my leadership can make decisions that much quicker, right? And there's a lot that goes into it, right? I got my accruals, right, that like an Artorio can work with, right? Then I got my reconciliations that need to happen, my intercompanies, right? And then I got my draft financials and my final financials, right? Well, if I can work through that with a couple different point solutions that are really targeted, right? And we talk about intentional automation or purposeful automation in the office of the finance, because when you look at across multiple finance organizations, they're very, very similar from one organization to another. But, really having that purposeful automation within the office of the CFO, some of these tools are, really good opportunities. And like I said, there's not just people savings, but there's also sort of opportunities around executive management and driving decision making.
Yeah, for sure. There's a whole category of, enterprise performance management, corporate performance management. Some of these have been around for many years, like, Hyperion is Oracle, ERP, whatever, EPM Cloud. My former employer, Host Analytics, now called Planful. They do a lot of stuff with close management and intercompany eliminations. OneStream is out there. They've been around for a number of years. But that market is kind of going through a bit of a rebirth right now, where they're kind of reimagining what this close consolidation looks like. And there's a lot of players that are up and coming. So that's corporate performance management is what Gartner calls it. Enterprise performance management is what Oracle calls it. But same thing. It's that all around that same topic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I think we're almost out of time. Do you have any closing statements or key advice you want to provide to our attendees who may be just starting out and what to avoid?
Nick, do you want to go? You go first this time.
I'll go first. And I'll give you the last word. So automation does not have to be a scary thing. There are a lot of resources that are out there. The shared services and outsourcers network, they do a wonderful job in helping people understand what are the pros and cons and issues and things that you should think about. I think anybody who's on this call is taking a very good first step by attending this webcast and potentially downloading some of the assets that we have. So kudos on doing that. So I would say educate yourself. Partner with a firm potentially like RSM that can help guide you. Because that's their whole job, is to help companies understand how to evaluate, because the solution for one company is not going to be the perfect solution for everyone. So don't be afraid of technology, embrace it. And that's the only thing I would say. Thanks for having us today, Jordan. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think you stated a lot of really good things there, Nick. And, the way I think about it is first understand the opportunity. Like, what are the opportunities that are out there? Let's start there. Right. Once you understand the opportunity that exists, then you can create a strategy to realize that opportunity. Right. Then, rely on other people, watch out, through the ecosystem. Right. We got to remember that, at the end of the day, software vendors are software vendors. Right. They're trying to sell you software. Right. And they don't always necessarily understand or have, your best interests at heart, if you will. No offense, Nick. But at the end of the day, right, there's a lot of solutions out there. There is a lot, right? And like I said, it's a confusing time because there is so many solutions out there. All right. And, you may be able to do a lot more with one solution than another solution. And there's no one size fits all easy button of like, okay, I'm just going to go with this. So, do your research, rely on some of the experts that are out there that have been through this, right? Be intentional, be purposeful around it, but don't forget about the human element either. Always go back and understand, like, what is this going to do to my organization, right? There was a question in there about a reorg within their shared services. This is a great time to look at automation, right? During a reorg, right? Think about your operating model. How do you want to operate? How are things coming in? How are they processed? How are they reported on? How are they analyzed, et cetera, et cetera? Think about that target operating model that you want to run. Understand the people aspect of it, right? And then, pilot and try things out. You can do a lot of things and, try things out to make sure that they're going to work. So, but, learn, listen, understand the opportunity, plan it out, strategize, right? And then be very intentional and thoughtful around your deployment.
Thank you so much for sharing your responses. I really appreciate you spending the time today to go through this, as well as including some of that fantastic data. I do want to remind everyone that a lot of this data is fed by practitioners such as yourself. So if you want to click on that SurveyMonkey link and share some of your own insights and experiences, please do. Otherwise, I want to remind everyone here as well that this will be available for on demand. So if you really enjoyed today's session and you either want to review some of the learning materials or you want to share it with a colleague, please do direct them towards the same website that you signed up with, and you'll be able to watch it again or share it for further viewing. Thank you so much for your time today. Chris, Nick, thank you for joining us.
Thanks,
It was a
Jordan.
pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.